Hi, I'm Nick Rains from Leica Academy Australia, and I'd like to talk to you about the 187 megapixel new multi-shot mode in the Leica SL2. Let me tell you a little bit about what multi-shot actually means. The camera, the SL2, has a movable sensor because it's stabilized to the IBIS system, in-body image stabilizer. That means that there's little motors that can move that sensor around. Multi-shot mode is where that sensor is moved in 8 different directions by half a pixel. And that composite of 8 images gives you a resulting image which is double the resolution of the sensor's native size. Okay, so 47 goes to 187 megapixels, which gives you about a 350 megabyte file on your card. And if you open it in Photoshop from Lightroom as a 16-bit TIFF, it's just under 1 gigabyte for one layer in Photoshop, so it's pretty impressive. One thing I'd just like to share with you as a bit of nerdy trivia is that the movement of that sensor is about 2 microns, which is, to give you an idea, is about the size of a bacterium or a human blood cell, and it's about a fifth of the width of a human hair. So if a human hair is about, more than that. Human hair is about 20 or 30 microns. That's a very fine human hair. This is moving 2 microns. So it's astonishingly high tech what's going on in there. It also means that when you shoot the picture, the camera must be absolutely rock steady. And in fact, the camera won't even let you shoot if it's not steady. There's a vibration warning that pops up in front of you to say, you can't shoot, there's vibration detected. Even if you touch the camera too much or jerk it slightly, it won't shoot. So it's quite unforgiving. The reason behind that is that given the tolerances, if you tried to hand hold it, which you can't hold something steady for that sort of tolerance of 2 microns, it's not possible. You might get away with it, but what you'll see is an image that's not quite as sharp as it could be. And you go, well, okay, that's fine. But then the argument would be, well, why not just shoot with multi-shot turned off and shoot in 47 megapixels and let the image stabilizer stabilize the shot? You'll probably get a slightly sharper result doing that than trying to hand hold the multi-shot mode without the stabilizer. Because remember, the stabilizer motors can only do one thing at a time. They can't do the 8-shot stepping at the same time as stabilizing the sensor. So essentially, you need the camera to be rock solid, and it needs to be on a really good tripod, and it also can't be terribly windy. If it's windy, you'll need a really, really good tripod or whatever. You need to do whatever you need to do to make sure that camera is absolutely rock steady. But I can assure you that when you do, the results are absolutely astonishing. You are genuinely doubling the resolution of the sensor. So let's have a look at some images. That's the technical stuff. I wanted to show you some of the images that one of my colleagues over in West Australia has been shooting. He's been testing this firmware for the last 10 days or so, and he's very, very impressed. That would be Christian Fletcher, who's one of Australia's best known landscape photographers, and he's moved to Leica SL from medium format. And I think his quote was, "Why would you need medium format when you're getting results like this?" So let's have a look at some pictures on the iMac here. This is the very, very first shot Christian took when he went out with the camera after I sent him the firmware link to download. And here you go, 16,736 pixels by 11,168. Now, just have a think about what that means in print size. If you divide that by about 240 for a good image resolution, you end up with around about a 60-inch print. Now, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a bit of history. I used to shoot medium format roll film on a 5.4 camera. And when I used to use the best scanner available at the time, and probably still the best scanner available unless you go to super high-end, drum scanners, I used to end up with a 14,000 pixel wide image and a 275 megabyte file. That's scanned from film. This is a 16,000 pixel image without any intermediate process, so they're super, super sharp. That will give me a 60 or 70 inch print. That's width, 70 inches, but as sharp as a A3 print off a lesser camera. unbelievable what you can do. So let me just zoom in here. Now it may struggle a little bit because this little iMac here is really struggling with these huge files. There we go. That's giving you an idea of the sheer detail in that shot. I'm hoping that comes up okay on the video. If you're watching the video, please watch it at same size rather than full screen, because if you go to full screen you'll be enlarging the 1920 pixels of the video file and it may look a little bit softer than it should. So again, not a perfect way of looking at images through a video, but it'll give you the idea. This image here is an image that Christian's made a big print of, and he sent me a little video which I will put up on the screen now, and you can see just how big he can make prints on his wide format printer. And that's this image here being printed at 2.4 meters wide, which is quite colossal. And I'll zoom in on this image, and that should give you an idea of the fine detail available. Just have a look at that. That's absolutely incredible. There's each of these little branches here is perfectly defined. Now, if you magnify the shot too much, you're going to see artifacts. You always do with digital. I mean, eventually you see the pixels. The idea is to view these images on the screen in such a way that it looks like the print. And if you view the images on a Retina screen on an iMac at 100%, it gives you pretty much a good representation of what the print will look like. If you view images on another monitor which doesn't have that Retina resolution, somewhere around 120 pixels per inch on the screen, you're better off viewing it at 50%, and that will give you a better representation of what that image is going to look like. It's not a perfect solution, it's a little bit of a fudge, but nevertheless it will give you a better idea. Now, I'm not sure whether you can see on the video into the shadows here, but the camera seems to give you, and there's no real way of measuring this, I'm talking about dynamic range, and it's a very slippery concept. You need to have everything locked down and everything's done in certain ways, and even then it's open to interpretation. I'm not going to say how many stops of dynamic range, it's relatively meaningless. What I can tell you is that the noise on this camera is reduced considerably. That means also, and they're not identical concepts of course, but that also will show an increase in dynamic range because the noise is not going to overpower any signal in those shadows. So anecdotally, I'm seeing about another stop of dynamic range, so deeper shadows, but more importantly, the shadows are cleaner. In fact, overall, if you shoot at 3200 ISO, you will see a much cleaner file. The reason behind that, I think, and this is I'm not privy to the secrets behind how this works. There's a lot of secret sauce going on in this camera, which we just don't get told about. It's not for public, not for public knowledge. When you do a multi-shot of any sort of camera, any sort of blending, noise is random. So if you superimpose two images taken absolutely in register, the image detail is in the same place, but the noise is a little bit different, and they tend to cancel each other out. That's why noisy video doesn't look as noisy as it should do, because each frame is being played and the noise is in slightly different places. Each pixel, each little bit of noise, if you can call it that, is slightly different. It randomizes out, and you get that with this camera too. So I can show you that with these shots here, which I just took. I'm just going to select both of them and put them on the screen side by side, and you should see, if I zoom in on that one, let me just move that to the same place roughly on the side, and then this one as well. Now this is at 2:1. I'm going to enlarge this one to 1:1 because that's the bigger of the two, and I think you can see clearly that the right hand image, which is the single shot DNG file, because each time you take a picture it takes the multi-shot image and a second DNG single shot, which it might use to blend in if there's any movement in the picture. That's what happens when you use the setting under drive mode, multi-shot mode, remove movement artifacts. The software blends in a second shot to hide the movement artifacts. You don't get the same resolution of those areas, but you don't need them because moving things tend to be blurry anyway, and the resolution doesn't really help with blurry objects, if that makes sense. But anyway, what you're seeing here is the noise at 3200 ISO, and just to prove it, there it is, 3200 ISO f8, and that's the multi-shot. because it's the 16,000 pixel one. This is the single frame, and you can see very clearly a big jump in, or a big drop in noise between the two images, which is very, very impressive. And that will translate through to final product. It's not just something you'll see on your screen. But we are pixel peeping here, okay? That's important to note. Going back to these pictures, these are a couple of pictures I took just the other day of Brisbane, and that will give you another idea of the difference. This image on the right, the fine detail of these windows and the window frames looks interpolated to me. It looks like it's really struggling at the limits of the sensor's ability to resolve, which of course it is. If you double that resolution, this now looks far more tight, far more compact. You will also find, if you do use this mode, that you will need to sharpen in a considerably different way. The basic sharpening that Adobe Camera Raw and Lightroom applies, which works beautifully for SL2 images normally, you have to be a bit more extreme. And I've been sharpening at a much higher amount and a low radius, and I've been using almost 0 in the detail slider. That's the difference between unsharp mask and deconvolution sharpening, and you can mix the two together. I'm finding that the deconvolution sharpening is adding in some little jaggy artifacts. Whether they show in a print is an entirely new, an entirely different story. I don't think they will. Remember that you're judging something on a screen at high magnification, and that is not necessarily even closely related to what a print might look like. Prints, to me, are the final arbiter of image quality. If an image can look really quite bad on the screen, when I say bad, I don't mean low quality, but it can look quite over sharpened and you can have artifacts in it. They don't appear in a print. So I know, and Christian Fletcher's confirmed this, that the little weird things that sometimes you see in these files, little jaggies here and there, absolutely don't show up in prints. So you can kind of ignore them. It's a good skill to cultivate, is translating what you see on your screen to what comes out of the printer. Now, of course, if you're not making any prints, then the resolution here is kind of pointless, because if your iPad, you're doing things for iPads or Facebook or whatever, or even normal publication, having 187 megapixels is not necessarily that useful. But if you do want to make prints and you do want to get the absolute maximum quality out of these amazing lenses and these amazing sensors, then you will find that this new mode gives you the most incredible results. I'll put this back on the screen. Where is it? That one there. And I'm personally quite staggered at how good these lenses are. Even at f2.8, this 24-90 zoom lens is absolutely razor sharp, and we're talking 16,000 pixels, 2 micron movements, 4 micron size photo size. I mean, we're almost at the limit of physics for this sort of stuff. It's quite astonishing. So if you do have an SL2, grab the firmware, try it for yourself, but remember that camera must be absolutely rock solid for this to work properly. Well, as you can probably tell, I'm quite enthusiastic about this new development with the SL2. 187 megapixels of juicy goodness definitely appeals to me. My name is Nick Rains. Thank you very much for watching, and if you like what you see, maybe click the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. That's it from me. I'll talk to you soon.